Did you understand the meeting on May 17th to be some kind of protest?
No.
Okay. What did you understand it to be?
That it was going to be a gathering that was going to include bikers that we considered through our intelligence had a beef with each other, and so there was a propensity for violence. I wasn't familiar at all with the COC before that.
And it's certainly reasonable for you to rely on some of the, I mean, do you think it's reasonable to rely on the intelligence you're receiving?
Yes, in a totality of the circumstances, we don't take everything verbatim as fact because sometimes it's third hand, and
right.
Unfortunately, criminal gangs don't like to tell us what their operations are.
Under oath, Chief Holt of the Waco PD tells us the intelligence they receive is third-hand information, meaning their whole operation is based on unreliable information.
Did you understand it that DPS would be participating in the, what would you call it?
Surveillance?
The surveillance for that day?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. What was your understanding of their participation?
That they were going to provide some what we call plainclothes agents with Officer Rogers, Detective Rogers, and that they were going to try to keep an eye on things.
Okay. Do you know how many folks were going to be there?
I do not.
Do you know if they were going to be undercover inside?
I was told at the briefing, I believe, that the decision was made not to put people inside.
Do you know why?
I don't know.
At what point did you arrive at Twin Peaks?
However long the briefing lasted, probably 30 minutes, and then I just casually made my way that direction after checking on some things in my office. I had a lunch with me, so I was just going to park a ways back because they didn't need the assistant chief in their business, and observe things and eat my peanut butter and jelly sandwich.
Okay. What car were you driving?
At the time, I was in an unmarked Chevy Trailblazer, 2005. It was goldish brown in color.
And so, can you tell us approximately what time you got to the parking lot?
I don't remember the specific time.
Okay.
I know it was before the meeting was supposed to start. I believe that was supposed to be at 1, so it would have been a considerable amount of time before 1 o'clock, but I couldn't tell you an exact time.
Were you in radio communication with anyone?
I was listening on the radio.
Which channel do you remember?
It would have been one of our encrypted channels. I don't remember if it was D or G.
Who were you listening to?
Our other officers at the scene.
So Waco Police Department?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you drive around, or did you just stay parked with your lunch?
I drove around a little bit because we had been told that to expect trail cars and counter surveillance, and so I had a little experience in counter surveillance, and so I drove around to see what I could see as far as trail cars and counter surveillance from the people who were involved, and then I parked.
Did you see any counter surveillance?
I saw some people who were certainly interested in what we were doing that were parked in cars.
Okay. Where?
In the parking lot.
Let me see if I can get you a picture. Do you recognize that photograph, Chief?
I believe I do.
Okay. And there's a laser pointer right there. If you'll show us, where were the cars you said you saw that were interested? Sure seemed interested in what you were doing.
Well, I would have been parked off the photograph back up this direction, right in the top 1 or 2 slots where because there's a row of stores that go along this way.
Yes, sir.
And so my main area of concentration, because I was going to park there, were the people around me. Okay. And so I drove around specifically in this area, in this part of the parking lot.
And did you see the folks that you saw, did they look to be bikers to you?
I don't know whether they were bikers or not. They were in cars, so they were certainly car drivers.
Okay. But you said they seemed to you were looking for trail cars, right?
I was looking for anybody who looked like they may be doing counter surveillance.
And did you encounter those folks?
I saw people who seemed to be interested in what we were doing.
Okay. And based on what you saw, you didn't attribute them necessarily to the COC event?
No.
Okay. Did you believe that all the folks that were attending that event were going to be gang members?
No.
Okay. How are you distinguishing between the gang members and the non-gang members?
Those who are identified through the Department of Public Safety.
Okay. And so, based on what?
Whatever their criteria is.
Is it common for, I guess, local law enforcement to defer to the state police in making those decisions?
Some, not entirely.
In your experience?
Yeah, I mean, some, not entirely. I believe there's a published set of guidelines that in order to enter somebody into the gang system, I don't remember the name for it, maybe Tex Gang, there are a certain number of guidelines that have to be met. So you have to rely on that information at some point.
Sure, and we've talked about that. I mean, officer safety,
sure,
lives can depend on
absolutely
the information that you get.
Absolutely.
And you should be able to rely on what your fellow officers tell you, should you not?
Well, you don't take it verbatim. I mean, with everything, you take it with a grain of salt, regardless of who tells you.
Sure.
Whether it's your fellow officer or your kids or whatever.
Do you know how someone named how someone?
For the second time, Chief Holt has said under oath the information is unreliable. This time he says with a grain of salt, even from fellow officers.
Name gets out of that database, that Tex Gang database?
I'm not familiar with that process.
An age out, I think it's called. Once the information sits there long enough, it just sort of disappears.
I couldn't tell you.
Okay. So you're only familiar with the part of the statute that identifies the criteria.
Well, I'm only familiar with it enough to know that it exists. I couldn't recite those lines to you at all.
Gotcha. Okay. So you didn't know whether or not all the bikers there were gang members?
No, certainly not.
Were you involved at all in the decision making about who got arrested that day?
No.
Okay. Well, I'm going to back up for a second. Do you have a laser pointer up there? Can you show us how I'm assuming at some point you heard on the radio the shots were fired.
Well, I didn't have to hear it on the radio. I mean, I was close enough to hear the actual shots being fired.
Okay. Can you show us with your laser pointer how you got to the area?
Yes, ma'am. So I would have been parked back here when I first heard the first volley of shots. I understand there were a number of volleys of shots. When I first heard that, and somebody on the radio said shots fired, because I'd put down my binoculars. I had been watching, but I put down my binoculars to eat my sandwich, and then I heard the shots go off, and so I immediately drove to, I believe that may be my vehicle right there, either here or it was right here. I drove down to the curb, grabbed my what we call heavy vest, my helmet, and my rifle, and then ran around the back side of Don Carlos, and eventually ended up right here.
Okay. How were you dressed under that heavy vest?
Regular uniform.
Is that navy blue?
It's called LA blue.
Okay. Do you know either DPS agent Corey Ledbetter or DPS agent Justin Overcast?
I do not.
Okay. Okay, freeze for just a second. Or back it up. Do you recognize this camera angle, Chief Holt?
No.
Okay, I'll represent to you that it is the back side of Don Carlos. May I approach the witness, Ron?
Sure. I'm sorry. When you say backside, what is the backside?
I'm going to
Okay.
show you a photograph.
Okay.
Are you familiar with the, ABCD, identifying the building by either A, B, C, or D?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and what is side A?
Be the front door.
Okay, so I'll show you State's Exhibit 6. If that's side A,
Yes, ma'am.
side C, would that be the back side?
Okay.
To you?
Don Carlos is strangely situated there, so I'd feel better about calling it the seaside.
Okay, we'll call it C side.
Okay.
Judge, if I may, if she'd like to have the witness and just instruct him where I-35 is, he just needs to get oriented where the new Chicago Pizza is. I think we could just do it a lot quicker so he's familiar with what that angle is. I won't object in leading on that aspect of it, Judge.
Are you oriented?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes.
Did you hit play for me? And Chief Holt, were you aware of any either local or state law enforcement officials that were going to be driving, I guess, that little blue car on the right that just opened the door and closed it?
I had not been given descriptions of their vehicles.
Thank you. Have you seen this, I guess, angle, this camera footage before?
No, ma'am.
We've seen a good bit of it. Shortly, there's going to be someone that enters the screen on the left-hand side, Chief. I just want to know if you recognize the person.
Am I still expecting somebody to come in
Yes,
from the
sir.
left? Okay.
Right there.
Yes.
That vest, can you tell from what we're seeing, is that the type of heavy vest that you would have been wearing that day?
It is.
Okay, is that you?
Well, from the non-tactical movement, it probably was me.
Touche. Shortly before you ran by, Chief, did you see the man in that blue car stick his hand out and sort of, if I could get your attention, sir, do this?
No, I didn't. I didn't see that.
Okay, and so you don't recognize him at all?
No.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Sure.
I'll pass the witness around.